Walk 2 Moons, Chapter 26, Sacrifices. The weekend was unbelievably long. Phoebe arrived with her suitcase on Saturday morning. I said, "Golly, Phoebe, are you planning to spend a month here?" When I took her up to my room, she asked if I was going to be sharing the room with me, if she was going to be sharing the room with me. "Why, no, Phoebe," I said. "We built a whole new extension just for you." "You don't have to be sarcastic," she said. "I was only teasing, Phoebe, but there's only one bed." "Good powers of observation, Phoebe. I thought you might sleep downstairs on the couch. People usually try to make their guests comfortable." She looked around my room. "We're going to be a little crowded in here, aren't we?" I did not answer. I did not bash her over the head. I knew why she was acting this way. She sat down on my bed and bounced on it a couple of times. "I guess I'll have to get used to your lumpy mattress, Sal. Mine is very firm. That's why I have such good posture. The reason you slouch is probably because of this mattress." "Slouch?" I said. "Well, you do slouch, Sal. Look in the mirror sometime." She mashed on my mattress. "Don't you know anything about having guests? You're supposed to give your guests your best that you have. You're supposed to make them some sacrifices, Sal. That's what my mother always says. She says in life you have to make some sacrifices." "I suppose your mother made a great sacrifice when she took off," I said. I couldn't help it. She was really getting on my nerves. "My mother didn't take off. Someone kidnapped her. She is undergoing tremendous sacrifice at this very moment in time." She started unpacking. "Where shall I put my things?" When I opened up the closet, she said, "What a mess! Do you have some extra hangers? Am I supposed to leave my clothes jammed up in the suitcase all weekend?" "A guest is supposed to have the best. It's only courtesy, Sal. My mother says—" I know. Sacrifice." 10 minutes later, Phoebe mentioned that she was getting a headache. It might even be a migraine. My aunt's foot doctor used to get migraines, only then they turned out not to be migraines at all. "Do you know what they were?" "What?" I said. "A brain tumor." "Really?" I said. "Yes, Phoebe. In her brain." "Well, of course it would be in her brain, Phoebe. I figured that out when you said it was a brain tumor." I don't think that's a particularly sympathetic way to speak to someone with a migraine or a potential brain tumor. In my book was a picture of a tree. I drew a round head with curly hair and put a rope around the neck and attached it to that tree. It went on and on like that. I hated her that day. I didn't care how upset she was about her mother. I really hated her, and I wanted her to leave. I wondered if this was how my father felt when I threw all those temper tantrums. Maybe he hated me for a while. After dinner, we walked over to Mary Lou's. Mr. and Mrs. Finney were rolling around on the front lawn in a pile of leaves with Tommy and Dougie, and Ben was sitting on the porch. I sat down beside him while Phoebe went looking for Mary Lou. Ben said, "Phoebe's driving you crazy, isn't she?" "I like the way he looked right in your eyes when he talked to you." "Extensively," I said. "I bet Phoebe's lonely." I don't know what came over me, but I almost reached up and touched his face. My heart was thumping so loudly that I thought he would be able to hear it. I went into the house. From the back window I watched Mrs. Finney climb a ladder placed against the garage. On the roof, she took off her jacket and spread it out. A few minutes later, Mr. Finney came around the back of the house and climbed up the ladder. He took off his jacket and spread it out next to her. He lay down on the roof and he put his arm around her and he kissed her. On the roof, in the wide open air, they lay there kissing each other. It made me feel peculiar. They reminded me of my parents before the stillborn baby, before the operation. Ben came into the kitchen, and he reached into the cupboard for a glass. He stopped and looked at me. Again I had that odd sensation that I wanted to touch his face right there on his cheek in that soft spot. I was afraid my hand might just lift up and drift over to him if I was not careful. It was most peculiar. "Guess where Mary Lou is?" Phoebe said when she came in. "She's with Alex. On a date." I had never been on a date. Neither, I assumed, had Phoebe. That night at my house, I pulled the sleeping bag out of the closet and spread it on the floor. Phoebe looked at it as if it were a spider. "Don't worry," I said. "I'll sleep in it." I crawled in and pretended to fall asleep immediately. I heard Phoebe get into bed. A little later, my father came into the room. "Phoebe," he said, "is something the matter?" "No," she said. I thought I heard someone crying. Are you okay? Yes, she said. Are you sure? Yes. I felt bad for Phoebe. I knew I should get up and try to be nice, but I remembered when I had felt like that, and I knew that sometimes you just wanted to be alone with the birds of sadness. Sometimes you had to cry to yourself. That night, I dreamed that I was sitting on the grass, peering through a pair of binoculars. Far off in the distance, my mother was climbing up a ladder. She kept climbing and climbing. It was a thumping little tall ladder. She couldn't see me, and she never came down. She just kept on going. The next day, as I was helping Phoebe lug her suitcase home, I said, Phoebe, I know you've been upset lately. I have not been upset lately, she said. Sometimes, Phoebe, I like you a lot. Why, thank you. But sometimes, Phoebe, I feel like dumping your cholesterol-free body out the window. She did not have a chance to respond because we were at her house and she was more interested in besieging her father with questions. Any news? Did Mom come back? Did she call? Sort of, he said. She phoned Mrs. Cadaver. Mrs. Cadaver? Whatever for? Why would she... Phoebe, calm down. I don't know why she phoned Mrs. Cadaver. I haven't been able to speak to Mrs. Cadaver myself yet. She isn't home. She left a note. He showed it to Phoebe. Norma called to say she's okay. Beneath Mrs. Cadaver's signature was a P.S. saying that Mrs. Cadaver would be away until Monday. I don't believe that Mom called Mrs. Cadaver. Mrs. Cadaver is making it up. Mrs. Cadaver probably killed her and chopped her up. I'm calling the police. They had a huge argument, but at last Phoebe fizzled out. Her father said he had been calling everyone he could think of to see if her mother had indicated where she might be going. We would continue calling tomorrow. He promised, and he would speak with Mrs. Cadaver. If he did not receive a letter or a direct phone call from her mother by Wednesday, he would call the police. Phoebe came out on the porch with me as I was leaving. She said, I've made a decision. I'm going to call the police. I might even go to the police station. I don't have to wait until Wednesday. I can go whenever I want. That night she phoned me. She was whispering again. It seems so quiet here. I don't know what is the matter with me. I was lying on my bed and I can't sleep. My bed is too hard. On Monday, Phoebe gave her oral report on Pandora. She began in a quivering voice. For some reason, Ben already talked about my topic, Pandora. And when he did his report on Prometheus, however, Ben made a few little mistakes about Pandora. Everyone turned around to stare at Ben. I did not, he said. Yes, you did. Phoebe's lip trembled. Pandora was not sent to man as a punishment, but as a reward. Was not, Ben said. Was too, Phoebe said. Zeus decided to give man a present, since a man seemed lonely down there on earth, with only the animals to keep him company. So Zeus made a sweet and beautiful woman, and this Zeus invited all the gods to dinner. It was a very civilized dinner with matching plates. Mary Lou and Ben exchanged looks and eyebrow messages. Zeus asked the gods to give the woman presents to make her feel like a welcome guest. Phoebe glanced at me. They gave her wonderful things. A fancy shawl, a silver dress, beauty. Ben interrupted. I thought you said she was already beautiful. They gave her more beauty. Are you satisfied? Her lip was no longer trembling, but she was blushing. The gods also gave her the ability to sing, the power of persuasion, a gold crown, flowers, and many truly wonderful things, such as that. Because of all these gifts, Zeus named her Pandora, which means the gift of all. Phoebe was getting into it. There were 2 other gifts that I have not mentioned yet. One of them was curiosity. That's why women are curious. By the way, because it was a gift given to the very first woman. Ben said, I wish she had been given the gift of silence. Last, there was a beautiful box, covered in gold and jewels. This is very important. She was forbidden to open the box. Ben said, then why did he give it to her? He was beginning to irritate Phoebe. You could tell. She said, that's what I'm telling you. It was a present. But why did they give her a present she couldn't open? I do not know. It's just in the story. As I was saying, Pandora was not supposed to open the box, but because she had been given so much curiosity, she really, really wanted to know what was inside. So one day she opened the box. I knew it. Ben said. I knew she was going to open the box the minute you said she was not supposed to open it. Inside the box were all the evils of the world, such as hatred, envy, plagues, sickness, and cholesterol. There were brain tumors and sadness, lunatics and kidnapping and murders. She glanced at Mr. Berkway before rushing on. And all that kind of thing. Pandora tried to close the lid when she saw the horrible things that were coming out of it, but she couldn't get it closed. And that is why there are all these evils in the world. There was only one thing good in the box. And what was that? Ben asked. I was about to explain. The only good thing in the box was hope, and that is why, even though there are many evils in the world, there is still a little hope. She held up a picture of Pandora opening the box and the whole shebang of gremlins floating out. Pandora looked frightened. That night I kept thinking about Pandora's box. I wondered why someone would put a good thing such as hope in a box with sickness and kidnapping and murder. It was fortunate that it was there, though. If not, people would have birds of sadness nesting in their hair all the time, because of nuclear war and greenhouse effect and bombs and stabbings and lunatics. There must have been another box with all the good things in it, like sunshine and love, trees, and all that. Who had the good fortune to open that one? And was there one bad thing down there in the bottom of the good box? Maybe it was worry. Even when everything seems fine and good, I worry about something will go wrong and change everything. My mother, my father, and I all seemed fine and happy at our house until the baby died. Could you actually say that the baby died, since it had never breathed? Did its birth and death occur at the same moment? Could you die before you were born? Phoebe's family had not seemed fine, even before the arrival of the lunatic and the messages and the disappearance of Mrs. Winterbottom. I knew that Phoebe was convinced that her mother was kidnapped, because it was impossible for Phoebe to imagine that her mother could leave for any other reason. I wanted to call Phoebe and say that maybe her mother had gone looking for something. Maybe her mother was unhappy. Maybe there was nothing Phoebe could do about it. When I told this part to Gram and Gramps, Gramps said, "You mean it had nothing to do with Phoebe?" They looked at each other. They didn't say anything, but there was something in that look that suggested I had just said something important. For the first time it occurred to me that maybe Mother's leaving had nothing whatsoever to do with me. It was separate and apart. We couldn't own our mothers. On that night, after Phoebe had given her Pandora report, I thought about the hope of Pandora's box. Maybe, when everything seemed sad and miserable, Phoebe and I could both hope that something might start to go right.